Welcome to Nourishing Conversations with Nicole and Christine. We have created this podcast to introduce you to many of the people and products that are in the health and wellness genre here in the French Riviera. And today we are welcoming Barbara Basalgete. She is originally born in Ghana, but she grew up in Virginia in the United States, and she moved to Nice in 2006. So she's been a local for quite a while now. She is a trauma-informed yoga instructor, does a lot of work with breath and the different things that breath work does with your body. And we're going to get into that in depth in this episode. And she has an incredible background in health food. She started Bee Juice, which is fresh juice, is probably one of the first people to bring fresh pressed juice to the Côte d'Azur. And she is the co-founder of Bada Boom Bistro in the Port District in Nice. Now, she is on to doing some really interesting things with yoga and also starting up a new English-only yoga teaching session in Nice. So without further ado, let's get started. Welcome, Barbara.
Thank you. Thank you, Nicole.
So,
Thank you, Christine.
Tell us a little bit about your yoga background.
I did a 200-hour teacher training in 2014, which was just a way for me to deepen my practice. I wasn't going into looking to teach when I did that training. I did it with Beloved Yoga School, one of the biggest yoga, we call it a sanctuary in Virginia, run by Mariam Obisi and Jafar. When I did my training, I was trained by Mariam Obisi and Jafar Alexander, and it was one of our first actually 200-hour teacher trainings in Nice in 2014.
Oh, okay.
In collaboration with Art Yoga. When I did the 200-hour training, it was a huge revelation for me because I had been practicing for a couple of years. Found yoga because I was asthmatic. I had an asthma issue after I had given birth. So I went into yoga thinking, this was going to be a way for me to manage the asthma, and came out of it with much more than that. So
that's interesting. I'd like to ask you about that later.
Yes,
so would I.
Yeah. I had the idea that, yoga was a way to just get toned. And when it was recommended for me to go in for the breath work, it was a completely different revelation that happened. So then I did a retreat with Mariam Obisi in Spain in 2013. And then her yoga retreat was all about the Yoga Sutras. And it's where it kind of opened my mind to like, oh, okay, wow, this is much more than what I thought yoga was. And so I was the one that initiated the yoga teacher training in Nice with my yoga teacher that opened Art Yoga. So together they came up with the yoga teacher training, and they did a lot of workshops to just kind of open up the knowledge and the tools in basically finding balance in your life. For me personally, it became a way to also connect with my body and my digestive system. It's actually thanks to yoga, found juicing before. Okay. Yeah, so it's been a whole journey with it. And for me, it was that connection with my body, because up until then I was a runner, actually. Like I used to run. When I couldn't run anymore because I had asthma, then I went to yoga to learn how to manage my breath so that I can go back to running. That was my whole idea. And then after each yoga session, I would just totally feel balanced and good. And I was just like, what is this? All I've done is just come here, done a couple of postures and breath. And I also noticed when I was having an asthma attack during yoga, by the end, I was calm. It had alleviated the suffocation. But then I'd go home and then I would, try it again, but somehow it didn't work. It was the strangest thing. I'll go back there. I do the breathing, I felt better. I went back home, it wasn't working. As my whole yoga journey continued through the teacher training, I also realized, you go in thinking, okay, I'm just going to just read a lot of texts. I'm going to, learn what the asanas mean and, all that. But actually you go in and you're doing work on yourself. So it was a very intense training for all of us. It was an immersion every day, using the texts, using the asanas, using reflections And through that, I did also come to a lot of conclusions about myself, which instigated to make some life changes. So I realized that actually the asthma, why was I having asthma actually in the first place, was connected also to my own life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So whilst I have not done the work on the things that are causing me the asthma, the body is here to just talk to you. So the symptoms, whenever you have disease, there's an imbalance, it comes through the body.
Yeah.
And
that's,
it could be,
sorry, I was going to say, because breath is often the missing link to optimal health as well. And we tend to breathe in a much more shallow fashion on a regular hourly basis during our lives rather than at a deeper level. And it has a massive effect on our physical and emotional health. So it's really great that you have actually gone through the whole process, felt it in your own body. And I just wanted to know, have you actually been able to return to running? Because I do know that breath work, as well as reducing blood pressure and all those things helping with anxiety, actually does improve athletic performance as well. So I wondered if you'd actually returned to running since or not.
Yes, yeah, definitely. Yeah, I did. Because the funny thing is that actually what happened is that, I took a big break from running whilst I was practicing yoga, because it was providing me with the effects that I get when I run, which is just like, when I run, I feel good in my body. It brings me into my body. Mm-hmm. Yoga gave me that for a long time. So the moment when I was like, oh, okay, I'm going to go back to running again. And you know what? I was so surprised, because it had been years. I was so surprised that I was able to pick up from where I had stopped. Because
really, even after years of not running.
Yes.
That's because your cells were a bit easy to be readily oxygenated with blood and get rid of the carbon dioxide. And you're probably much more alkalized in a less acid environment within your body, because you're able to get rid of the so-called rubbish. On top of going as well towards the more juicing element, which is as well alkalizing your body. It's amazing what you've done. I think it's an inspiration to everyone that's going to listen to this to know that there is a balance between breath work and nutrition, and they go hand in hand and can actually help stop autoimmune diseases from progressing any further as well.
Absolutely.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, they can. Absolutely. But a lot of autoimmune are triggered by stress of some kind, whether it be a psychological stressor or a physical stressor, environmental trigger, as in, some kind of environmental pollutant that is actually impacting the membranes around the cells of the body. And once you start oxygenating and alkalizing your body and getting rid of sort of a stagnant state, you can help create better flow within the body.
Yeah. And that's very important for people, especially like me, who have sedentary jobs of sitting and editing and writing. And I've noticed a big difference in my own breathing, just from my job, sitting most of the day. So yes, that's super important. Okay, so you returned to running, and you found that you picked up right where you left off years earlier.
Yes.
Was that must have been a huge shock, because when you're a constant runner, you know when you miss a few days and you can feel the difference. So that must have been a big surprise for you.
Yeah, it was a huge surprise. And I also realized that actually during the running, because for me, my asthma is triggered during the moments of pollination, like when we spring and fall. I was diagnosed allergic to every tree plant on the Côte d'Azur. So I remember coming back to running and asthma kicked in. What happened then was that I realized that my exhales were short. So what I ended up doing is I found this way of managing the breath, where I was, instead of panicking, the moment when the asthma is coming, because with asthma, you either panic and then it gets worse, or you take in deep breaths, you exhale, you hold fundus, you hold your perineum, and then you and after a while, it just, your body relaxes, and then you can then come back to rhythmic breathing. So that was for me.
How long of a process is that to train your body to not go into panic mode and control the breathing? Because that must be very difficult. I mean, if there are asthmatics out here listening to this thinking, how is that even possible?
It's definitely a practice. I mean, you know, like I see that after when I started yoga, like I did not know how to breathe at all. I mean, I just like, you know, breath was stuck here. I was just always constantly like up, you know, like, and you know, when you learn how to breathe correctly, which is just doing a couple of, you know, like pranayama, which you do on a regular basis, then you understand the mechanics of breathing, because every day you show up as just when you tune into your breath, you can tell, how am I doing today? It's just, how am I breathing today? If your breath is here, then something is not right with you. Something is going on mentally, or you're not completely, you know. So for me, it was just a way to check in. But it takes time, you know. Definitely, you can't say that, you know, I can't say that it just happened like overnight. It was just a practice over time that, you know, and then the relationship with your breath, because one of the things that I've realized is that the only thing we have, really, the only companion you have is your breath. The moment you develop a relationship with her, or, you know, him, you know, but I call my breath her, then it becomes very intimate relationship. You know, it's how you know yourself, how you breathing today, you know. Definitely.
That should be a good question we ask each other. How are you breathing today?
Yeah. It's actually true. But do you have any tips for any of our listeners on how to get started, as in if they wanted to just try to improve their breath work at home, and we're not talking about something that's time consuming, what simple thing could they do on a daily basis?
The easiest thing to do is just to place your hand on your heart, on your chest, and the other hand on your belly. And the moment you close your eyes, you totally disconnect, you know, and go back inside. And then the moment you just observe, you know, you close your eyes and just breathing normally, observing the breath. Actually, by doing that, you instantly calm your breath. I think that anytime that you remove like the senses, withdraw like the visual already, you connect to what's in here.
Great.
And you can start like that. And as you know, you feel the breath in your hands, you know, you can then start the relationship. But then it's all about like, you know, belly breathing. I think belly breathing is like the easiest way to access, you know, regulating your nervous system, which maybe in the beginning you may be breathing, you know, just in the chest, and that's okay.
Yeah.
And people also say, like, you know, with yogic breathing, it's basically like, you imagine that you have a mirror in front of you, and then like you start like breathing through your nose, and then taking a big sigh.
Okay.
And then as you just breathe through your mouth, maybe one day you try just breathing the same way, but closing your mouth.
And so we want to get you to start breathing through your nose.
Yeah.
Correct?
Yeah. Nasal breathing is so important. There are so many people that are breathing far too much through their mouths. And that's what leads to health issues. I was going to ask you though, Barbara, is there anything, because we're reading a lot about breath work and seeing a lot about breath work popping up, and it's always, you know, 4 seconds in, hold your breath for another few seconds and then breathe out. Is there any particular rule in your world around this or not?
It should be simple. I mean, I think that really, like, you know, I mean, there are different schools also of yoga that say that, you know, actually at the end of the day, you shouldn't even try to master or manipulate your breath, you know, but it just always comes down to awareness, because breath happens, it's automatic. We can't stop breathing even if we want to stop breathing, but we breathe. That's just it, right?
Yeah.
So we have the 2 ways. We have breath is voluntary and involuntary. So the moment that we voluntarily take, control of our breath, we become more conscious. We become conscious of where we are at the present moment. And then that in itself is just that, bringing you back to your body where you are. And that immediately regulates your nervous system.
Yeah. So I think for our listeners, they need to know that state of the stressful breath is you're triggering what's called the sympathetic nervous system. And what you're talking about is taking people out of that state and into the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the one that is the more relaxing, calming, anti-anxiety, health beneficial kind.
Exactly, yes.
There is one thing I wanted to add. Just I was thinking about it initially, and it's for people who maybe have lost their way a little bit, because I certainly have myself. I grew up in a very unusual kind of childhood. My parents were into all sorts of things, and they were yogis, and I grew up going to an Indian ashram in Berkeley, and sat for Shaktipat and did yoga at a very young age, and did breath work and meditation at 7. Wow. And I naturally was a belly breather for most of my childhood. And I think that as you become an adult, you start going to classes every day, and you're busy and you're doing work and this and that. I definitely got away from that. Even if I would take yoga. When I lived in LA, I had my yoga studio down the street. I am not a morning person. I cannot. It is a struggle for me to wake up in time for going to work. But when I found a class that really resonated for me, I was there at 6 a.m. twice a week, and because I felt so amazing afterwards. And nobody that knew me could believe that I was going to a 6 a.m. yoga class, but it helped me so much that I would do that. And even after that, I moved to Europe, I moved to Italy in 2009. There's no yoga anywhere. And I would maybe look at classes. They didn't really have much yoga classes online at the time. And so I really lost that. Then I started getting into writing. I got into journalism. I did my master's in journalism, began to just sit in a chair most of the day. And once I took the job as being an editor of a magazine, I'm in the chair. If I'm not out and about at events, I'm in the chair from 9 a.m. until 7 p.m. And I really started noticing I was doing shallow breathing. I couldn't even take deep breaths anymore. It was a struggle for me to take a full deep breath. I would have to consciously do it, and I realized that it was really difficult for me to even do the belly breathing. So I'm finding myself struggling with all sorts of other related problems to, I guess, Christine, to oxygenation levels and
stagnation,
acidosis and stagnation. And so it's all of this like kind of cycling thing. And I had an event, I had a Speedo event at a pool, and I start to do a lap on the Olympic sized pool. I couldn't even get across because my body was just gasping for air. And the guy basically told me, he's like, you can't do swimming, you need to work on your breath. And I was like, oh, crap, I've really lost my breathing. And so, even if you know it and you have a background, you really can get lost. It's something you need to keep up. And yeah, I wanted to share that it's important to go back to that. And I do need to work on that to get my diaphragm more flexible and not be so tight. And I feel myself holding out, that clenching of like, and then I have to stop and be like, okay, deep breath. And it's this automatic thing that just happens to me without me even realizing it.
In a nutshell, it's all about, back to basics. Nothing has to be complicated.
Yeah. And
food doesn't need to be complicated.
Thing.
Yeah. Breathing, movement, everything has to be simple. And if we just go back to the basics, we'll be fine.
Yes. And to also like allocate some time, even if it's just to like, go for a walk.
Yeah.
During the day, just get out, go for a walk. And like the moment you do that, like you breathe, like, if it's for 30 minutes, because it will come, you have the base there. You just need to reactivate it.
And so that's an important tip for people who have desk jobs that are, in work all day, and it can get hectic, and, before you're doing 10 things and then it's lunchtime and you're late for lunch. And I know that process. And so it's so important just to stop and take a walk while you're at work. I mean, people who live in Sofia, it's great. There's trails. You can just take a walk through the woods, or if you're by the sea, take a walk on the promenade. Because it's important, you get so busy that you just run, and you need to stop.
Yeah, and it also quickly brings in burnout, those kinds of habits.
Yeah, and that easily leads you to burnout, which I was there.
Yeah, so it's just, really, I mean, it's definitely a practice. I mean, I've been there. It's also like one of the reasons I got into all of this, and it's definitely like now I'm definitely not going back, because, you realize that you can do it. There is the moment when you say, I don't have time to do that, like take a break. That's actually when you
do
have to do it.
Yeah.
And there's an interesting thing I read that I think is great, and that we should all try to practice this, is instead of saying I don't have time, you say I'm not making it a priority. And then see how you feel when you say that. Because we will find we have time. We do.
Yeah, well, we do, definitely.
The world in general, especially the youth right now, and there's just the cases of anxiety and depression are through the roof, and COVID did not help that. So you had mentioned that the breath work is really helping people who are suffering from trauma or just general anxiety from everything we've been through in the last 2.5 years. Is it as simple as just sitting down, calming yourself, doing the breathing? Is that just the best start that people can do?
Yeah, really, it's as simple as that.
Okay.
I think that if we all, because I think in our culture, we don't cultivate relationship with our breath. It's something that we're taught to do at a young age, because even with my daughter is also an asthmatic. And ever since she was little, I would put her in her bed, and I would just do her a shavasana, like, just where she lays down, and I say, relax your head, relax your shoulders, just basically prompting different cues so that she can just kind of let go. Because sometimes we're subconsciously holding on, holding our breath here, or sometimes we're not even like, whenever we have a shock, or sometimes we don't breathe, just sit here. So the moment you release,
I find myself doing that often. I'll be so concentrated on something, and I realize I haven't taken a breath in a while.
Yeah. And it's really as simple as that. And if it's something that we were taught to do at a younger age, then it becomes an automatic practice. And then we don't go into the anxiety, the panic attacks. We can stop things right there. Because the more our body is in stress mode, the more also we have disease. When the body is in stress mode for a long time, then you're eventually are also causing the body to produce some hormones that are not necessarily good for you. Cortisol, and then it becomes a whole vicious cycle, and then you're constantly in that cycle. But if you are able to control the breath the moment that you feel the panic attack coming on, the anxiety coming along, tool, for trauma-informed practices, and that we give our students, we always say the first thing you feel trauma coming up, just touch your body, hold on to some part of your body, ground your feet, and then connect to your breath.
And when you say ground your feet, does that just mean put them on the ground flat?
Yeah. Or just come down to, where are my feet? Just ask yourself, where is my feet? The moment you place your feet then on the ground, and consciously, you can lift your toes and then release them one by one onto the ground. And that moment when you're in your body, you're out of that mind.
Your head, yeah.
And when you're out of
and
your
it's
head,
so simple. It sounds so silly almost because it's so simple, but it really is drawing your attention
down
out of your head.
Yeah, that connection down as well actually creates a whole lot of energy throughout the whole body. So I actually find, because I've done a little bit of breath work in just one session, I felt a huge difference. Whereas I've tried to meditate before and not really got into it. But breath work works for me. And I've also noticed, again, being a very, very keen runner, do lots of running, that if I go out running and my head is too full, so I'm in my more sympathetic state, so I'm a little bit more stressed out, my run is not as good as if I just go out and I'm in a relaxed state, because obviously it's upset my breathing.
Yes,
my breathing is going to be shorter and I just can't get the oxygen in.
Absolutely. And that's the one thing I've noticed also, like when I am in that zone of running, when, it's also like I used to run with very music that just completely like will jack up my heart rate, and then I get, like where, what I do now is actually put on classical music. And because music makes
it's calming. Yeah.
Oh,
it's
yes.
so calming. And that's what I like.
And then you both find that you run longer or just easier, or how it does it actually affect your
For me it's easier. I find that I've had a much nicer run. I don't run against a clock, but I always find that my pace is better, but it's because I'm getting the oxygen in, so I can go faster if I want to, so I can pick up the speed. And we live in a hilly area, so I do like the hills, but I can run fast up a hill if I am in a relaxed state and can breathe well, instead of just thinking I'm not going to, if my head is turning over, I tend to slow down and may even walk up that hill.
Yeah, and also be okay to say, okay, I'm walking today, Yeah.
But it's all down to breath work. And there was, have you heard of Paulet? He was the world's foremost renowned pioneer in the field of breath work. And he said something along the lines of breathing is the link between the body and mind, between spirit and the matter that's around us, and between the conscious and the subconscious mind. So breath has the ability to be a force and a bridge and as a tool, and it connects us all to each other as well and to our own nature source. So it's so important. And I think a lot of us have lost the ability just to stop, breathe deeply, as you said, ground ourselves, because we're always on the go. Everything has to be so fast these days rather than slowing things down. And
just constant distractions too, because even if we're having a day off or we're at home or it's after work, you have, most people anyway, usually have the TV on or the phone in their hand and they're on social media, and it's designed that way to suck you in, but then it's still keeping you from checking in with your body, checking in with yourself. And I think that's a big reason why there's so much anxiety right now, because we're just not not checking in with our bodies as much.
And you could say, getting back to this massive growth of anxiety within the younger community, they're also the ones that have had exposure to Instagram and all the other things that we didn't have when we were growing up. Yeah, exactly. All the things that we didn't have. So all those stimulants, and that can also,
and it is a stimulant.
Yeah, and take them away from themselves, that connection with themselves. So that could be another element that has played a massive part, that they need to actually get rid of these other distractions and just learn how to ground themselves. That you should probably be taught in schools from a young age. I mean, I think there are some schools doing some yoga, and they've seen the improvements of the yoga on relaxing those kids, but just breath work. So when they're feeling things hard, that they can just take 30 seconds, a minute out to ground themselves.
Let's get back to the yoga thing. And you had mentioned in the very beginning that you started yoga just to get toned. Most of the yoga things, at least here, you'll find them in the gyms or in exercise clubs. And so there's a big conception that yoga is an exercise and it's a way to get your body, ship shape and that nice lean toned look, which it does do that. But can you explain really what yoga is? Because it's so much more than that. And yoga really is the connection of body movements with breath. I think that gets forgotten a lot. So when you're like running to the gym and you have an hour yoga class and you're like running through the motions and maybe they'll put a little ab work in there. It's kind of missing the concept. It's an entirely different exercise at that point, and it's not actually yoga. So can you kind of give in a nutshell how yoga really is?
Yeah, so basically, it is part of it, because yoga actually has 8 limbs.
Okay.
And the part where you are on the mat doing the postures is one part, and the part where you're also breathing is one part, pranayama. But also there is a whole, part which is also about, we call it the yamas and the niyamas, which is the ethics of yoga, like how you live, the relationship you have with yourself and with others. And then we also have dhyana, which is more about meditation. And then we also have dhyana, which is concentration. And then we have
so it's this much more vast
it's very
concept
vast
for your entire life then.
Yeah, and it's always something I want to say that it's the asana and the pranayama is one aspect, is what we see the most actually. And yes, even when you're on the mat, the goal is actually to take that, when you come to yoga practice, you bring an intention. And it's that moment when you bring an intention to the practice is where it becomes, it's not a sport. Because then, whatever is happening on the mat, it's an attitude. It's how you're cultivating, am I cultivating gratitude today? Am I cultivating nonviolence on the mat with myself? And so it becomes a way of practicing on the mat, which, certain postures will also show you, we all have challenging postures, in yoga, and those are our biggest teachers, is that, when I'm in this posture, how my mind totally functions at that moment. And, what can I do to find ease in this moment? And it's the same thing as when you're also living off the mat. It's that, life is going to throw you events and things. And how do you show up? What attitude, So that's where the yoga becomes a little bit much more rich, because it will make an impact in your life if you practice it on the mat and off the mat.
I love that there's so many different elements to it, because that makes me want to look more into yoga, because I've understood the breath work, but I've understood it more as being something very physical that people go out and do. And I think a lot of the people I know who are very much into yoga do it purely for the physical side. They may
I think that's the general conception.
Yeah.
Not everywhere, of course. India knows a bit more. Originators of it, but in the Western world anyway, I think that's the general conception. It's an exercise form.
Yeah, so it's like we've adopted some parts of it, but not the entirety of it.
Yes, and which is also for sure we'll say, it is a practice that's originated from India, and it's got the Indian philosophy and spirituality. And of course, the way it's going to translate in, the Western world is going to be different. And it's okay, we can take parts of it, but then the issue then becomes when it's all misconstrued. And then also when people then, today there's so many types of yoga. It's we've got goat yoga, we've got all these, at least it's so that's where it just gets a little bit out of hand. But at the end of the day, it's exactly what you said, Christine. It's it's really about, bringing, unifying the mind and the body. And yoga happens when you do that, where using the breath. So when I had those mysterious, when I'd go home after yoga session, I'm like, what is this? Like, all I did was just do that, and I feel so good, and I'm content. Meaning, it's anything could be going on in my life and crazy stuff, and I would be anxious. But then for some reason, I found contentment with what I am, who I am, where before I would think, I need to do this and change this. But
yeah,
when you do yoga, it's like all is well.
So do you find as well then that having a whole load of other stuff going on and then having gone to do the practice and then coming back, that you have a different perspective on the issue at hand, and you're able to deal with it in probably a much more well-considered way than had you not actually done your practice?
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely.
It's great. And I think there's so much sort of this busyness that we like to call stress. For some people, there is proper stress going on. Some of us are just very busy, and that's out of choice. But there can also be overwhelm, and that can also lead to burnout. So I'm just thinking again, if people could just take a few minutes every single day, that we can prevent that sort of overwhelm and leading to burnout, which takes people out of their lives for months on end.
Oh yeah.
Those that suffer with adrenal burnout, it can, some can't get out of bed in the morning, and it can, maybe breath work could have pulled them back and stopped them getting there in the first place.
Are there any studies done on how breath work can help adrenal fatigue?
Yeah, there is actually. There was a Harvard study on I don't know if it was linked directly to adrenal fatigue, but it was linked to burnout.
Okay.
I read it a while ago, but yeah, they did a study on that, on the effects of it, and it is scientifically proven.
So even if there are people who maybe have given yoga a try and it's just not really for them, they still can get these effects just by doing breathwork sessions.
Absolutely. And the simple tools, like I was saying, the simple tools of the moment you see yourself, because we don't have a relationship at all with our breaths. I mean, the moment that, you see yourself going out of hand, it's just like everyone says, just breathe, just touch your body, breathe. The other thing too is also very important. It's like
really interesting the response you can get, because I trained as a Pilates instructor many years ago, and I remember the instructor, this is way back late 90s, early 2000s, when teaching us, saying we could get a reaction. We may find ourselves suddenly crying, and we may find ourselves suddenly laughing, and it was all due to the way that we were breathing. And it's true, some people in the room, other instructors now, were crying. I actually had a fit of the giggles, thankfully. But it was amazing what was just coming out purely from, we were lying there concentrating on, inhalation, widening out the diaphragm, and then exhaling and, pushing our air down and pulling up in the pelvic floor. But just that work, because you're stimulating the solar plexus and all that emotion that's stored within the gut. I mean, we saw so much emotion in muscles and psoas muscles.
So that brings us to the trauma aspect of yoga. Can you explain to us, Barbara, a little bit about how trauma can get stored in the body?
Yes, we can definitely restore, like whenever, say, like something happens, like you have an accident, or you have like, an emotional reaction. Usually trauma is caused by different things. It could be an accident, it could be a natural disaster, war, or just simply, something, sexual abuse, verbal abuse, whatever, right? Immediately.
Or worldwide lockdown.
Yeah, absolutely. We're all, I mean, we haven't talked about this, but yeah, collective trauma from just, the lockdown, what's happened in the past 2 years, that is all stored in our body, and it's stored in our body, in our tissues, in our fascia, and and definitely it's because it's how also the body protects itself from dealing with it at that moment, so you store it away, and then until something triggers it, so that's, we all kind of function on triggers, and triggers then can make us angry, can make us anxious, can make us emotional, make us sad, make us depressed, all these different things that, and sometimes we don't even know why, something, is making us react a certain way. It's because we've stored it in, we've totally, as a protection mode, we haven't dealt with it. So then it's in there until something is triggered. And until then we become conscious of, oh, okay, this is something that, like I noticed that, like, when people have a friend, who has had a problem with like a sexual abuse, right? And so, like, whenever she's approached by a man, she starts sweating,
there's a physical response.
It provokes a physical reaction. And until you deal with it, then it's always constantly going to happen. And then also sometimes it's physically in your body, of course. So, like, when you do yoga, and sometimes the moment, like, I had someone the other day cry during a yoga practice, and then she because it's just in shavasana, when she let go, tears just started rolling. But it's also through that you release, you will constantly release until then finally maybe you're able to want to talk about it, deal with it, and find a way to kind of move forward. And there are different ways for people to transcend a trauma. I personally have done some energy work where it's just about affirmation, where you turn that experience, you basically try to relive that experience and then change the outcome of it.
So you're reframing the whole episode, which is interesting because, again, as we were saying about the belly, the whole of the diaphragm area and the psoas, they're very connected to this fight or flight stress response.
And so when you're doing the breathing, you're really moving your diaphragm, and that kind of releases stored things.
Exactly, it releases stored trauma and even wounds from the past. So
even childhood trauma.
You can bring back emotions and memories from the past. So that's why it's really important to work with an experienced practitioner, because all that emotion can come back, but you need that practitioner to maybe help guide a person into that reframing, so they don't get stuck again in that moment.
Yes. Absolutely.
So, and then you come away with lightness and clarity and can move on, and hopefully, but otherwise, the person could still be stuck there. It might be out of their body, but they haven't processed it still in the right way. So I don't know, Barbara, if you've experienced that at all in working with people.
Yes. Yeah, I have done some personal work on that, where you basically like had to reframe,
or with yourself.
And then it doesn't necessarily like happen right away. Things, because there's so many layers. When you have trauma, there's so many different.
It's like an onion, isn't it? And you have to peel back slowly, layer by layer. Yeah.
Totally.
And then once you get to the core, it's the part that regrows.
Yes, exactly. And you have to do that. Yeah. And it's almost kind of like we say in yoga as well, is that, the mental, like even like our mental, thoughts become beliefs, and then beliefs become like, anchored in our ways and habits and that sort of thing. And so then, when you become aware of your thoughts and how you're also like talking to yourself, because how many times do we also, how we talk to ourselves can be kind of balanced too.
Yes, so, you mentioned before, I made a note that you talked about nonviolence, and then you added with myself. And I think that there's so much attention put on being kind to others, and especially now, the part of being woke and this and not insulting or offending anyone. But I don't think we've really talked about how much negative self-talk most of us have. It's almost automatically ingrained. And I mean, even if you're aware of it and you've worked on your own self-talk, you could still say, oh, I'm such an idiot. Things that we don't even think of. But, when you really start to look at internal self-talk, it can be quite brutal.
Yeah.
So that's something that you need to work with people on, I see.
Definitely. I also find that if we speak more kindly to ourselves, nicer to ourselves, we then have the capacity to be nicer to others. But it has to start with us first. It's very superficial to go out there and be kind to others. It always has to start from us, and then it's coming from a genuine place. It's coming from a place of more of love and kindness than it is from just words. We've been doctrined to say.
Totally, because it's even like, you know, when we say, like, you know, when you've got these thoughts that come, it's not sometimes, if you think about weeds, like you can look at your mind as like, you know, like weeds of different types. Some of them are good, some of them are bad, right? Like some of them also like totally like take over like all the good stuff, you know. But the thing is, with any weed, if you just like cut them off and you don't take out the root, then, you know, it's still going to grow even more.
Yeah.
So it's better to say, you know, like, okay, I'm going to cultivate more nice things, thoughts, which eventually will take over the less, you know, nice or more negative thoughts. So that's how you then change the field of your mind field. It's not about just trying to like be like, you know, because then that's the same root of being dominant. Okay, I'm not, you know, I'm gonna think more positive, you know. I'm going to beat myself over these thoughts or these things I've done, or, you know, just gonna like, okay, let me bring in new seeds, new, you know. And for me, it's also
but to get to that point, you need to experience it and hear what's going on, right? And acknowledge that kind of record that's playing in the back, which might even be from someone else when you were growing up. That
absolutely, yes,
yeah,
like
it's on replay.
Yes. So first step is acknowledging the problem.
Yeah. But I love that I love that what you were saying about, you know, the weed and pulling that out, because it's exactly how I explain about the gut microbiome and the beneficial and the not so beneficial bugs in the gut, and that we have to try and fertilize those good gut bacteria so that they grow big and strong and outcrowd or get rid of those more pathogenic ones that aren't going to be beneficial to our health. So I really love that connotation that you had there, because it just pulled me straight back to my gut again. It's all with the gut that we're talking about, isn't it? With breathing and nutrition, showing it's one big circle.
Yeah, no, it is. It totally is, because it is our, you know, I mean, it's our second brain, right? Our gut, right? Yeah. But it's really, I mean, I think it's actually our first brain, because
we've got most of the serotonin produced in the gut, which obviously is controlling our emotions. We've got 90% of it or more. And then it has to get, obviously our brain does produce some as well. And then traveling up by that LED cable, the vagus nerve. So,
So Barbara, you mentioned that, I think you said this, that your digestion improved as well after you started doing this. Can you elaborate on that?
Because you wasn't stressed.
The stress does affect your intestines. Absolutely.
Yeah, you can't digest and assimilate food if you're eating in a stressful sort of zone. You can't. It's just you won't feed your body the right way. Everything stops when you're stressed out. Body closes down. It's not the time to sit and eat. It's when you go into that fight and flight response.
Yeah, you don't digest, and you know it's all about it's you know, for me it was always about, like, you know, constipation, which is connected to breath, because you're holding the breath. It's like
you're holding everything in.
You know, it's like, okay, release, you know. So
and that's really interesting you say that, because I see a lot of women in clinic, and one of the big complaints is constipation. I'm thinking it's mostly women that tend, well, I don't know if it's mostly women, but there's a lot that are holding on to a lot of emotion, maybe not necessarily in a place that they want to be, and not sure what direction to go in. And the biggest complaint I get is that they are constipated, you know, and I can tell them to eat their fiber and everything, but it's not going to change anything. Well, it might change a little bit, but it's not going to improve the long-term effect unless they're actually dealing with the root cause of the problem, which is, again, that mind, what's going on in the head, where's it all starting from.
Yeah, and it's also like, we are what we eat too, it's, at the end of the day, it's that too, what the things that you put in your body for whatever reason is, maybe linked to the way you're thinking, comfort foods or like sugar, because, you're
emotional eating.
Yeah.
So did you find that you had bigger cravings then when you were pre your breath work and yoga experience? Did you have more cravings that you experienced on yourself?
Yes, yeah, definitely. I was eating things that, like, I've got a sweet tooth. So, then I was craving lots of sugars. And of course, I was eating lots of like things that I love, cheese as well, which totally I can't digest. So, yeah. And at the end of the day, it's, once you let go of certain, foods, you also realize that, I've had, it's interesting for me though, because I've had like different periods in my life where, okay, it's okay to eat certain foods. And then like, I go for a while, I've been a vegetarian, vegan, now I'm flexitarian, I'm like, try it, but it all comes down to like, what is it that your body needs at this moment? Because your body.
And I think it's really important for people because so many times you'll read something like, oh, this is super bad for you. And so people think, oh, I got to cut it out, or this is the right diet. And I think people get very fixated on things, but every body is different.
Yeah.
You handle things differently, you digest things differently. I've tried several diets. I've tried vegan, vegetarian, all sorts of things. And I feel how my body reacts and responds to things. And I think each person really does need to play around a little bit.
Yeah, and be a bit more intuitive around their food as well.
Absolutely, yeah.
And so now you've done both of those, and now you've come to more of a flexitarian thing. And are you feeling really good with your body now?
Yes, yeah, doing really good. Yeah, right now I'm in a place where I'm also like, even in terms of juicing, been studying Ayurveda, which is also like the sister of yoga, in the sense that, it's more of the lifestyle part in the foods and, but it's all more, it's not like a spiritual thing.
It's a very ancient Indian practice of health and body and diet and all of those things.
Yeah, exactly. And it basically follows nature. It comes from the premise that we are nature, and that, if you see what we are nature with different elements in us. And so, we're always just trying to find balance. And it's all also about like, what are we as humans, what are we here to do? Like, we have to also accept the fact that, because for example, like, most Ayurvedic specialists are not promoting or encouraging juicing, so I went through my own, like journey with that, when I was told, like, you need to really like, you should stop drinking juices because you have too much sugar in your gut, like, for your, in terms of like your microbiome. Right now it's just,
it needs the fiber too. It loves eating on the prebiotics that are in a lot of vegetables. So juicing will remove a lot of the fiber, so it's got nothing to munch on.
Exactly. Yeah. So we have to be aware of that, of the whole system. I mean, juicing is a tool that can help.
Yeah.
And see it as more as a therapeutic tool. Yeah. But it's not something you should be, because we're humans, we need to masticate, we need to eat. So juicing can help the moment when you're imbalanced, in the sense that, okay, maybe my gut is like, I'm not able to absorb certain nutrients because maybe I'm also sick, or, and it's a good way to fast.
Yeah.
But then beyond that, and there's also, for certain people should be able to do it, and some people are not advised to do it. So it's a very, it should be based on a case by case and, by person.
I'm glad you said that, because there's so many people that are just jumping on the new trend, you know, juice fast, you must follow a 7-day juice fast. And I've seen people sicker after going on that because their underlying issues haven't been looked into before they've jumped onto that. So
especially if someone has a lot of industrial toxins or heavy metals in their body, it can actually make them quite sick.
they get a big Herxheimer reaction.
So you do have to be careful. You have to know what's going on in your body kind of ahead of time. So tell us a little bit how you got started with the bee juice, because that was a fun thing you started.
Well, that's the thing, because I mean, also when my whole system was, I was constipated. I was like, it was just, so being connected to that aspect of my body where I was just like, I would love to be able to like, regulate that, and also like, of course, I was addicted to cheeses and, like sugar and all that. So
that's one of the guilty pleasures living in France, right?
Of course, yeah.
Unlimited varieties of cheese.
Croissants and breads and all that, right? I mean, it's like, then, yeah. So, I mean, the juicing was like, I basically like, I was inspired by a woman who was, her name is Chris Carr. She was a cancer patient. And I loved her attitude. So I was like, okay, you know what, I'll try it for like a couple of days. And when I did it, it was amazing, because for me, it was like, wow, first of all, like I felt, more energy. Like I realized also the benefits of fasting when your digestive system is sleeping. And, from then on, there was this sense of like, okay, maybe craving more foods that are alkaline as opposed to more acidic.
Yeah.
So that was like, for me, like, oh, okay, so it set me up for eating healthy for a while. It was just and I did it religiously, like cleansing for, but after a couple of years, like where I realized, and then I also did I did like colon cleansing, I did lots of different things. It's like when you're kind of like out there, but now I'm back to like this kind of place where I'm just kind of like, like I know I'm connected more to my body. I know there's some times when I actually do need to eat animal protein, and, and I do it mindfully, because it's not, because I think that really we're humans in the sense that, there is that we are meat. We're also meat. So like meat also builds like, tissues and, in a different way.
Incredibly important amino acids.
I'm not saying like go out there and just be crazy, but choose mindfully, whatever meat, animal protein you need to eat. Because I also feel that in terms of ethical, we're humans, we're also going to die, someone else is going to eat us. It's just this whole process of like, to be transformed in different, So
and you say this after being co-founder of a completely plant-based vegan cafe.
Yes, but you know what? The funny thing is, one of the things we always said is that our restaurant is not vegan. Because we don't do it from a vegan philosophy. We do it on the basis of, what, you can also eat plant-based and have a complete meal. It's about eating seasonally healthy. We also wanted to generate a bistro ambiance where it's not just, we don't want it to become a vegan ghetto. We want everyone to, like, if you're not someone that's healthy or like, come on in. Actually eating plant-based can be fun and delicious and like to discover.
And I have to say, Bada Boom is such a fun, like for me as a Californian, to have walked in and it was just like instantly I was transported to home where, it was way before any of the vegan things, and it's just plant-based, healthy food, real whole foods, because you don't have weird, crazy mystery proteins, but really amazing foods that are created using sweet potatoes and quinoas and different, and just seeing like all those grains and beans and jars on the wall. It was just, I walked in and I was in love.
That's so refreshing to hear that it's so whole food based, because a lot of people are eating, going gluten-free or vegan, but then not necessarily eating a healthy diet because they're still consuming an incredible amount of processed stuff. It's not coming from the whole food basis.
Yeah.
They're still taking things out of packets.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
I always loved Bada Boom for that. And it created a community too, as a community cafe. I wish I lived closer. I would go all the time.
So say, can't you expand and open another one sort of a little bit?
I know. Yeah. But yeah, we hope so. Now that things are kind of getting back to normal, I mean, we hope that, we can grow it and at least grow the idea, the concept.
So do you teach the breathwork somewhere where people can come to get sessions with you, or is it in with your yoga?
Yeah, it's always connected with my yoga. Yeah, I mean, with my yoga, like I definitely, I take the opportunity all the time to, share, I mean, just the knowledge, I mean, why are we doing this, and it's the same thing, people, I notice, like, I mean, because even if, I always bring a beginner's mind to the class, because it's like, the breathing, we all can't have enough like review of how to breathe properly. Like, so, and for us too, I mean, for the whole studio as a whole, they are very much into bringing like ancestral, like the knowledge, and it's all foundation is breathing. I mean, we always say, even if you want to come to yoga and you want to lie down and just have shavasana and breathe, it's also okay.
Yeah, you don't have to get yourself twisted into the exact forms that the teacher's saying. Yeah, it's all about going at your own pace. So you are starting a new English only yoga classes, and this is where?
So this is at Art Yoga Studio on 11 Rue Defly, and it's in Nice. And I teach actually we have 2 English speaking classes that we just added. There's a Monday, I mean, and they're all early bird classes,
which is not typical to find here, because often the first yoga class is maybe at 9 a.m., which if you work, it's impossible to go to.
Do it, right? So, I mean, and as we said, imagine if you had your day, you start off your day breathing or checking in, your whole day will be different. Yeah. So, I mean, ideally, yoga should be practiced before you start your day. But okay, you don't all have the luxury. But if you can at least give yourself that, maybe once a week to be able to do that, and then, not also thinking that you need to go all the time to studio to put in a practice. And, because with my classes, actually with all of our classes at Art Yoga, we always give little sequences for people. We tell them, even if it's 5 minutes in the morning where you just sit and have a little like sadhana, check in with yourself, and those questions of like, how am I breathing today? Just those, things, or even checking in. We've got like a breath, like, the alternate nostril breathing. Breath
which we didn't talk about, the alternate nostril breathing, which is really important for your brain and it resets things.
Yes, it brings your nervous system. And it's also, you can check in and say, okay, if your nose, one nostril you have a heart block, so that left side, or that could be your parasympathetic, you're in parasympathetic or sympathetic mode. Then you basically balance, so those different things can be, tools that, you can do as part of your yoga. So, so anyway, like the yoga classes that we offer is in English are Monday mornings with a colleague, Michelle. She does a yoga fit class, from 8 till 9. And then I do a Thursday morning class from 8 till 9. And that, because those classes are a little bit more energetic, because we have more energy.
Get you moving, yeah.
We just woke up.
So I do want to mention, so all of us, we all speak French, but as I was saying to you the other day, I've been to French yoga classes and I don't have a problem with understanding what she's saying, but there is just something when you're focusing in on yourself, and then maybe there's a term or something that it's new to you, or you kind of have to switch your brain to the other language, it pulls you out of that a little bit. Yeah. So even if you speak French completely fluently, it can actually be easier and better to have a yoga class in your own language, because you don't have to like open your eye and look at what she's doing and then it distracts you. So it's not just for, people who don't speak French, but there is this, it's more comforting and less distracting, I think, if it's in your own language.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say that it's not for people who haven't learned French yet, but no, there is actually I've noticed a difference, and I don't enjoy going to yoga in French, even though I enjoy yoga very much, because it's just different and it distracts me, and I don't get the same.
You don't get that mind, body, spirit connection.
Absolutely.
It's not the entirety.
Yeah. Even if we are doing a class in French and we have an English speaking person and we have to alternate, that's not the same thing, because you can never get the full experience. So to be able to have full English class is
Because of our talk on breath work, would you be considering doing just breath work sessions, or doing private lessons of breath work?
Yes, I do it actually. I do mostly with I have a couple of cancer patients that I do it online with, but I can definitely could be something that I offer for sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. How do people get in touch with you?
So the best way is either by email or by phone, which at this moment where I'm in transition with the juicing, the best way to get in touch with me is just by phone. I don't have, actually also have social media. If people want to see a little bit more of what I do, I have an Instagram account that's connected to my Facebook account. That's Barbara Yoga, but it's with the maybe it's something.
Well, we'll have the links and all the information in the information box. Oh, great. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you, Barbara.
It's been really interesting, and to have a chat about this and the different things that breath can do, and how yoga isn't just about getting toned.
Yeah. And I'm sat here with my feet firmly planted underneath my chair, really grounding myself.
I'm not. I'm sitting in a yogi pose with my feet. It's just been really great chatting with you. And
fun. Thank you, guys.
Very inspiring.
So we will have all the information to contact you if people locally want to have some breathwork sessions or go to your English yoga.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you to listeners for listening to our Nourishing Conversations. Please like and subscribe, and check out our next episode next month.